What is up, guys? Back again with another UFC prediction video. This week, we got Fight Night Imavov versus Dolidze. I think it's going to be an incredibly exciting matchup. Really good stylistic bout for both of these fighters in the middleweight division, and we are going to break it down today and make a prediction on it. Thankfully, last week, we did get the pick right, picking DDP to beat Sean Strickland for the middleweight title. I did predict him by KO, and I made a lot of good reads in that fight, like the switching stances, how the grappling would, change the match as well, and also how his left body kick would open up a lot of good shots for him up top, which it did. So I definitely made a lot of good reads on that matchup there. Thankfully, I got the pick right, but just not the method of the KO, which I'm not super upset about because I don't think anybody really saw Dricus du Plessis going to a decision. But moving right along into Imavov versus Dolidze. So with Imavov and Dolidze, I think this fight is going to predominantly take place on the feet. I like Imavov's Soviet boxing style. It kind of reminds me of Dmitry Bivol, at least with their footwork, the way they are kind of bouncing, the way they propel themselves into their punches. They're very similar and it's pretty effective. Imavov doesn't tend to use a lot of round kicks. He does have a pretty good kicking game, going to the legs as well as front kicks, teeps to the body. He does that quite well. Dolidze is more of a power kicker. He'll throw a lot of roundhouses to the guard, kind of like, a Muay Thai style of kick. And he does that well from both sides with his left and right kick. But Dolidze, he definitely imposes a grappling threat. He was able to hold down a lot of his past opponents like Allen and secure wins that way. But I don't think that's going to give him a huge advantage in this matchup because Imavov, he has very good defensive grappling and he's able to get himself out of scenarios that he doesn't want to be in and then get back up on the feet. And if he ever needs to get off of the feet and use grappling more defensively just to be able to change levels in the fight, he can do that as well. Really good fights for examples of these would be the Ian Heinisch fight as well as the Buckley fight. Buckley, especially in that third round, he was coming out, swinging for the absolute fences, trying to get the KO because he was down on the scorecards. And Imavov was, really able to use his grappling to nullify that, tire out Buckley, and be able to coast to a decision. Neither of these guys have incredible power in their hands. I think the cleaner striker is going to be Imavov, just with overall technique, but Dolidze definitely has the power on his side. He kind of throws like big hooks that are really telegraphed, to be honest. He did that really bad in the Marvin Vettori fight. He stung Marvin with a good shot, but he just had no shot selection whatsoever. And he threw like 10 just big overhand, didn't even try and set it up whatsoever, just telegraphed overhand rights. And it looked really sloppy. He can be kind of one-dimensional with his striking. I think Imavov will have the advantage in that realm. But he does have some power. Of course, we saw him knock out Phil Hawes, but that's Phil Hawes. I feel like a damn feather touching his chin at this point in his career would put him out. But there's definitely something to be said about the power of Dolidze. I wouldn't be surprised if he got a big knockdown and was able to jump on Imavov and secure a positive grappling position. That wouldn't surprise me at all. But Imavov, he has a lot better cardio than Dolidze. Dolidze has showed in some of his fights that once it gets to the end of the second, third round, especially this one being a 5-round fight, he does tend to struggle with his cardio a little bit. He slows down a lot. The output goes a lot lower, and he kind of gets egotistical and fights with a low fight IQ. I think even if he hurts Imavov or gets in a dominant position on the ground, a lot of the times he'll rush the submission, trying to jump on a heel hook or something like that, and he'll give it up and it'll go back on the feet, where I think Imavov is just going to have a crazy speed advantage. When you look at these two side by side, Dolidze, he moves very, very, very slow compared to Imavov. And Imavov just has that fast twitch ability to snap shots like Dolidze doesn't. So I think that's going to give him just a big differential on the feet to work with. You definitely also have to look at the age discrepancy here. Dolidze being 35, Nasruddin Imavov being 28. So Imavov definitely has the youth on his side. Of course, in mixed martial arts, once you get above 32, 33, your body does start to deteriorate a bit. It can't do the same things it could when it was younger. So you definitely have to look at the age advantage on the side of Imavov. Both of these fighters also do a very good job throwing low kicks. It's nothing out of this world, but they do implement it in their game quite well. But they both do kind of struggle to check the leg kicks. So I could definitely, picture a lot of low kicks being exchanged in this fight and a lot of damage being done with them. Both of these guys are the same height and reach, so there's not going to really be any intangibles there whatsoever. But I think an intangible that does come into factor is that Dolidze, he gets frustrated, and when he gets frustrated, he tends to fight egotistically, like I mentioned, and with a low fight IQ, he, starts yelling and punching himself in the chest and trying to hype himself up in the middle of the fight. And whenever a fighter does that, they're just trying to block out the insecurities in their own brain by, distracting themselves, hyping themselves up, and kind of lying to themselves in the middle of the fight. We saw this when he was not having success landing on Vettori, when he just kept on throwing overhand rights. He wouldn't even bring his right hand back to the guard. He would just throw it, and if it would miss, he'd wing a backhand off of it with just no technique whatsoever. Looked super sloppy, and I think that definitely leaves him open on multiple occasions for Imavov to counter him, because Imavov does have a good ability to counter. Nice uppercuts from both sides. So I think that could be a shot that Imavov could use to some success. For my official prediction on this fight, I'm going to go ahead and say Imavov, round 4 or 5 KO once Dolidze gets tired and the grappling threat to save him isn't really going to be there. I would not be surprised at all with a decision. I think if I were to have to put an exact method on it, I would go Imavov by decision. And, I think this is going to be a good fight. It'll most likely go over whatever the over-under is set at. I have not checked that yet, but, looking at the over-under on this fight, if it's decent money, decent odds, I think betting the over, wouldn't be a terrible idea. I think a lot of these higher level matchups tend to go the distance, especially when one of them doesn't have a very specific finishing style, and neither of these guys are very specific finishers. They're more of, decision fighters. But, both of these guys have good knees in the clinch. So I think that, if they get in the clinch, they'll probably exchange some knees. Dolidze will probably try and change levels. Imavov will hit him with a good scramble. I could see Imavov landing a nice hook off of that and catching him. But, I think this is going to be a closely contested matchup, but I am going to go Imavov by decision. He's just shown really good fight IQ and the ability to stay calm when someone's pressuring them. And I think, the Buckley fight is a great example of this. Even though Buckley isn't as tall as Dolidze is, he has a similar build, and he also comes forward with big meaty hooks. And Imavov was able to nullify those with the grappling, with the footwork, and, have success in that fight. I think it'll be very similar to this one. So that'll definitely be a good fight to reference for this one in terms of predictions and overall level of competition that's been beaten as well. I mean, I don't think you really even have to look too deeply into this one. Imavov, he, just 2 fights ago fought the ex-champ, Sean Strickland. He did lose that fight, but he didn't do awful, and he went all 5 rounds, showing that he did have 5-round cardio. I like the look of his cardio more going into this 5-rounder than Dolidze, who kind of gasses towards the end of the second and the third. Also, he was fighting, in his last fight, he was fighting Chris Curtis. Had some success in that matchup, of course, that did have to get stopped. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see the end of that matchup, but I wouldn't have been surprised if it was going to be an Imavov decision, which is what I'm predicting here. And then Dolidze failed to beat Marvin Vettori, and if you can't beat mediocre Marvin Vettori, even though he has an absolute steel chin, and he really isn't a bad contender at middleweight, I think he's kind of underrated, you're not going to get me you're not going to get me leaning in your favor over a close fight to Vettori. I got to go Imavov in this matchup. So yeah, that is going to be my prediction for Imavov versus Dolidze. I'm going Imavov by decision, but we also got a nice little co-main event on the card as well. Drew Dober versus Renato Moicano. Really looking forward to that matchup as well. I'd say that either Moicano gets it done by sub or Drew Dober by KO or decision. I'd probably lean Drew Dober by KO or decision, specifically the KO, but That's going to definitely be a hard fight to predict as well. I think it's going to be a good card we got. I'm not going to bore you with my predictions for the rest of the card. Definitely once I get a nicer setup, grow the channel a bit, I'll start doing full card predictions. But those are my picks for the co-main event and the main event of UFC Fight Night, Imavov versus Dolidze. Thank you guys for watching the video. Have a great rest of your day, and let me know who you guys got in the comments.